Hello. It is kind of wild to learn that each of the judges of this year's Booker Prize read 150 novels over only 7 months to arrive at this long list of 13 books for this year's prize. That is a lot of reading. I do a lot of reading, but even for me, that would be a giant push. And I think a lot of us readers wish we could read that much because we have TBR stacks that are so high. And recently, at a festival, the author, Chris Power, one of the judges of this year's prize, talked about some of his reading tips to read like a Booker judge. And on the Booker Prize website, they published this article of his 8 tips. So I thought it'd be fun to go through these reading tips and see if I actually follow any of these practices and whether I think they are helpful or not. So I will go through and discuss them, but I would love to hear in the comments below, do you follow all of this advice, or do you think you might want to adopt some of these practices now, or do you have any other reading advice to actually read more books? Because I know a lot of us want to read so much more, even though we may read a lot already. Tip number 1 is 5 minutes is better than nothing, because a lot of us have busy lives, and a lot of people will say, oh, I'd love to read, but I just don't have the time to. But realistically, most of us could find 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes in a day to read. And if you do that, that is better than nothing, rather than, as he says, trying to find this idealized block of time of a long weekend when you can read entire books, because for a lot of us, that's just not realistic to get to. And so I agree, trying to fit in a few minutes here and there is definitely better than nothing. And over time, that accumulates to reading a lot more books than you would if you would just only read when you go on holiday or something like that. Although if you only read for 5 minutes a day, you will not be getting through 150 books over 7 months. So I assume for the Booker judges, they carve out a lot more time than just that. Number 2, he says, read whenever and wherever you can. And he gives the example of a fellow author and judge, Kylie Reed, who is in the process of moving, and she has a young child. And so she says when she's in these in-between places, after she puts her child to bed, she will just spend time in the bathroom, sitting in an empty bath, reading, which to me sounds quite uncomfortable. I mean, I would have to put a lot of cushions and blankets in that empty bath before I was comfortable enough to read. I'd much rather just sit in a chair or on the floor. I think sitting on the floor would be a lot preferable, but whatever gets you reading more and whatever inspires you to read, that's totally fine. But yeah, I definitely agree that reading whenever and wherever you can is best, and it's something that I incorporate a lot into my practices, especially over the pandemic. I got much more into the habit of listening to audiobooks alongside reading physical books. And I know there's debate about the use of audiobooks and stuff, but I've found it really useful. And quite often I will when I'm out and about or doing mundane tasks, I will be listening to an audiobook. But then when I have time to sit down, I will read the physical book of that same title, and so have a kind of hybrid reading process in this way if an audiobook is available. And it's interesting. It gives a different perspective on books, and it allows me to get a lot more reading done. But I can definitely only listen to an audiobook if I really can totally concentrate on it, because otherwise I will be distracted by other things, or if I'm doing a task which it requires any sort of thought or input at all, then I can't be listening to an audiobook. But if it's just folding clothes after doing the laundry, then I can totally listen to an audiobook for that, and I do. 3, accept that you can't read everything. And I know this is a challenge for some of us readers that get so greedy about our reading and enjoy creating really giant to be read piles, and then finding it a bit overwhelming to even get on with that. In fact, I find it a bit overwhelming. I know that there's a lot of books here on the shelves behind me, but they are all neatly organized, but I get a bit stressed out every single time I make a video because normally I'm sitting here at my desk, like facing a window, but when I make these videos, just over here to my right is a piano on which are piles and piles of books, and underneath the piano are piles of books as well. And I even can see some unopened packages of books that I just haven't got to opening yet. So every time I make a video, I can see out of the corner of my eye these piles of books, most of which I haven't got to reading yet, and thinking, oh, when am I going to get time to read all of these books that I want to? So I think it's easy to stress ourselves out as readers about these things, but just to be a bit more chilled about it and say, I'm never going to get to all of these books, but it's better to aspire to get to some of them and just taking one book at a time. And I know that sounds like really simple advice, but yeah, sometimes I can definitely feel overwhelmed by the amount of reading that I want to do and realize that I'm not actually going to get to all of these books. So just to keep in mind that I'm not going to get to all of the books, and that is fine. 4, take notes. And this is something that I've been doing a lot more in recent years, and since I've started doing bookish stuff online, is taking notes about what I'm reading, because inevitably, no matter how invested I am in the book and how many moments there are that I think, oh, I'm definitely going to remember this, by the time I get to the end of the novel, and especially after I've read some other books after that, I will have forgotten so many details about it. And just making small notes, which I just do it on my phone, or if I'm out and about, or if I'm at home, more often I'll do it on my computer. And Chris Power says that he makes notes in the margins of books. I still haven't got over that thing of like, oh, I can't write in my books. And I know I ought to. I know I really should, and underline passages and all of that, and fold down corners of pages. That's even more controversial. But yeah, and I don't judge people that do that. Well, maybe I do. I do judge people a bit of marking books and blemishing them in that way. But I personally, I can't quite do it yet. But taking notes definitely does help, and just even little copying out a line or making a little tiny note which will jog my memory about something that I found so striking about that book. It makes it so much more helpful when I go and sit down to try to make a video talking about that book, because often when I'm trying to discuss my thoughts about a book, I'll just have a very rough sketch about certain points that I'll want to discuss. But if I just sat down to try to talk about the book without having any of those notes, I think I would find it a lot more difficult. 5, traffic light your thoughts and feelings. And this is a really interesting insight into the process of being a Booker Prize judge, because he says a few days before their monthly meeting, they will be sent a spreadsheet of all of the titles, and then they have to give a code to each of those titles of whether they mark it green or amber or red, showing just very roughly like how they are feeling about that book. And then those spreadsheets are collated and sent to all of the judges, and so they can see the kind of temperature of feeling about these books before going in to discuss them in a lot more detail. And that's a really interesting part of the process, and I can imagine doing that with a group of friends or a book club. And I might do this with my own book club to see how we get on in our general feelings for some of the books that we've read. But yeah, I think this really must be a really interesting thing to get this spreadsheet and then go through the details to see whether the other judges' general opinions align with your own. Definitely a geeky thing to do, but a fun one. 6, embrace the unknown. And this is an interesting point about even if a book is labeled as being part of a certain genre or something, when you go to pick up a novel, you never really know what you're going to get in that story or how it's structured. And some novels might be more experimental, some might be more straightforward in their storytelling, or it might blend a number of different genres and cross between them. And yeah, I think this is a really important point to keep in mind, because I do worry sometimes that I slightly pigeonhole myself in the types of books I read, even though I think I read a fairly wide selection of books in all sorts of genres. But I do worry that I get sort of, yeah, caught in reading what I know I'm probably going to like, and but then at the same time, it's the kind of books that I like. And so I have a recent example of this, of a book that I wasn't expecting all that much from actually a different book prize shortlist, the Wilbur Smith Adventure Writing Prize. I'm reading the shortlist for that, and one of the books on the shortlist is Redemption by Jack Jordan, and this is marketed as and presented as and written as a straightforward thriller, but it's one which is done really well and which I found very, very gripping. But I was also really invested in the story and the characters, and it was so thrilling. And there's so much violence in this, and so much really like hot emotion that is in the like burning emotion that is running throughout this novel, as these characters are basically driven to their living ends. And and I found myself completely engrossed in it. But if I wasn't reading this for a book prize, then this is a novel I probably never, I might have like glanced through it and been like, oh, this looks kind of interesting, but not have got around to it. But I'm so glad that I read it. I had such a great time reading this. And so, yeah, I would like to do that more with my reading. And it's part of why I enjoy following book prizes, that it pushes me to read certain titles that I might not have picked up otherwise. 7, enjoy the conversation. And he gives another little insight into the judging process, where he says every month the judges get together to discuss 25 or 30 novels that they read over the course of that month, to have really in-depth conversations about them. And yes, this adds so much more to the reading process. And I've definitely found in the past few years of running an online book club with so many great engaged members who make really intelligent comments, that it makes me even more excited to read even more and think about what I'm reading in a lot more depth, of trying to figure out why I responded positively or negatively to a certain book, and thinking about the relative like qualities or negative aspects of it. And so I've found this so wonderful. So I always really encourage anyone, if you have a local book club, to be a part of it. I'll put a link down below to my own book club, if you want to consider joining mine. We have really great discussions. But I was chatting to a friend the other day. She says she's been a part of an in-person book club for 30 years, and they have been meeting every month for 30 years to have discussions about books. And I think that is so incredible. And you develop so many great friendships and connections with other people, as well as talking about books in a lot more detail and being motivated to read so much more. And finally, point 8 is being willing to change your mind. And I think this is the most challenging bit of advice that Chris Power gives, but I think it's a really good one, because I think so many of us, when we read a book, we will always have our own perspective on it. We'll have our own thoughts and feelings about it, but to recognize that as subjective can be quite challenging when we might have had a very strong reaction to it. And so to really see other people's points of view and take that on board, and either accept that or dispute it, or to dismiss it, to really do that with an open mind, I think is really challenging and difficult. And it's been another aspect of why I've so much enjoyed being part of a book club, because we get so many different opinions to the books that we read. In fact, the most recent Booker Club book club book that we've read that is longlisted for this year's Booker Prize, Endling. Yeah, we have had so many different opinions about this, and and I've found it really interesting taking on board people's perspectives that are very different from my own, and it's really enhanced the experience. It doesn't always change my own personal opinion of the book, but it definitely enhances my reading experience to see other perspectives like this. And another example from Booker Prize history is from a couple of years ago. If you may remember, if you've been watching my videos that long, the novel Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein. When I read that book initially, I did not finish it. I DNF'd it after about 50 pages because I found the character and the way that it was written so irritating, but because it was shortlisted for that year's award, and there were lots of readers whose opinions I trust that felt really positively about it and strongly about it, I went back and I reread it and gave it another try to see, would my opinion change? And it did change. I felt I got a lot more out of the book reading it a second time, and maybe just the first time I read it, I wasn't in quite the right mood, or it just wasn't gelling with me, and so I put it aside. And of course, that's totally fine to do with a book, and if you don't feel like going back to it, but going back to it, I got so much more out of that reading experience and really identified with it in a much stronger way than I expected to, completing the entire book. The way it looks at how people can become isolated within a community, and the way that groupthink works within a community to ostracize certain individuals, and made me question the way that maybe I, kind of minimize myself to kind of go under the radar in certain situations because I don't want to be stand out and might be a target of criticism or scorn and different ways. And so, I think it's a really interesting book. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. It wasn't an enjoyable experience, still wasn't an enjoyable experience reading it, but I did get a lot out of it, and so I appreciated it in that way. So those are all of Chris Powers' points. I would love to know if you use any of these practices, or if you want to take on any of them now, or if there are any other bits of reading advice that you want to put in the comments below to encourage me and other readers to hopefully read more, because I know there are just so many books out there and we want to get to them all, and it's just crazy to think of reading 150 novels in that short period of time. That is a really big push and a really big challenge for the Booker judges, and I still don't know how they do it. But again, I don't know how Joyce Carol Oates writes so much. Even though I've discussed this with her so many times, it's still hard to comprehend how she writes all that much. But anyway, that's a side point. But thank you for watching this casual conversation about reading habits like this. And I hope you're doing well and that you are reading good things and finding really good quality reading time. And I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.